Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Molly Martins Corbett. On February 12, 1976, Jason Corbett was born in Limerick, Ireland. His family was very happy, and he was one of 8 children raised by his parents, Rita and John. Jason had a twin brother named Wayne when his father lost his job. Jason quickly took a part-time job as a security guard at the school sports center. He was eager to earn extra money to support his family. Jason was loved by his family and respected by his friends. He was intelligent and easygoing. Jason met Margaret Fitzpatrick. They later got married and welcomed their first child in September 2004, a son named Jack. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Sarah, Margaret, and Jason lived happily together and raised their children together. However, their happy life took a tragic turn on November 21, 2006, just 3 months after Sarah was born. That night, Margaret woke up and felt an asthma attack begin. Previously, a nebulizer had helped her, but this time, the medication did not work. Jason rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, they lost precious time and did not arrive in time. Margaret passed away. Jason was extremely sad after losing his wife. He could not imagine how deep the grief was, especially when he was faced with the challenge of raising 2 young children alone. He felt as if he had lost everything, but he knew that his son and daughter were waiting for him at home. This realization forced him to be strong for them, instead of succumbing to despair. Jason tried to hold on for his children, which gave him the strength to continue. Jason's relatives tried their best to support him, although he appreciated their help. Jason did not want to be a burden to his family. He decided to hire a nanny in 2007. The first woman who came to help was Czech, but they had difficulty communicating, and he had to let her go. He then hired a Spanish woman, but she did not speak English, which Jason had trouble with. In addition, both women were looking for temporary work, and Jason wanted to find someone more stable. He needed a long-term nanny who could be a part of his children's lives and provide reliable support for the family. After careful consideration, Jason concluded that hiring an English-speaking nanny who was looking for permanent employment would be the best solution. In early February 2008, he received an email from Molly Martins Corbett, a 20-year-old woman. She attached a resume that was later found to contain false information. Molly claimed to have graduated from Clemson University. Although she had actually dropped out, she also claimed that she had passed a test and was licensed to be a foster parent, which was also not true. Molly had a tendency to lie frequently and was often caught in the act. However, Jason did not know this and believed that he had found the right person. Molly agreed to move to Ireland to care for Sarah and Jack. She lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and flew to Ireland on March 10, 2008. Things did not start well for Molly when she arrived at customs. She was refused entry because she had only purchased a one-way ticket. This caused complications with immigration because she could not confirm how long she would be staying or provide a special work visa. Eventually, Molly was able to resolve the issues and was allowed to enter the country. Jason asked a good friend of his to pick Molly up at the airport. The friend later said that, when she first met Molly, she felt that the young woman might not be right for Jason. Molly was attractive and dressed very formally, almost as if she were competing for a beauty pageant rather than working. However, Sarah and Jack quickly got used to Molly, and things seemed to go well. Molly looked after the children, and Jason felt very comfortable. Over time, Molly and Jason developed a closer relationship, and Jason began to ask her out on dates. However, it is important to mention Molly's American boyfriend, Keith. They were together for years until Molly decided to work in Ireland. Her ex-boyfriend, Keith, claimed that they had not officially broken up before she moved. He also alleged that Molly had mental health issues and had just been released from a psychiatric hospital. According to Keith, she was not in a position to move to another country and look after children who had lost their mother. Molly had told Keith that she would be staying in Ireland temporarily, which was strange because she had told Jason that she wanted to be a housekeeper for a long time. After 2 weeks in Ireland, Molly informed Keith that she would not be returning. The news devastated him. Keith felt betrayed. It seemed that Molly had made a firm decision to cut Keith out of her life, which hurt him deeply. Jason felt reassured that Molly was getting along with his children and that everything seemed to be going well. The children were growing attached to Molly, and everything seemed fine. However, Tracy, Jason's sister, realized that Molly had some suspicious points. Molly did not want to discuss her past in America, no matter how they asked. She always answered vaguely, as if she was hiding the truth. The couple's relationship progressed quickly, but Jason emailed Molly and asked her to return to house for a while. He expressed in the email that he felt their relationship was moving too fast and admitted that he was not ready for a second marriage. This upset Molly, and she responded with some harsh words. In the end, they decided to stay together, but Jason wanted Molly to find another apartment and a new job. Molly agreed to this, but in the end, she never moved out and continued to live in Jason's house. One day, she expressed that she no longer wanted to live in the house where his ex-wife Margaret used to live. After much persuasion, Jason agreed and sold the house. On Valentine's Day, 2010, he proposed to Molly. He truly loved her. And, most importantly, he was sure that the children loved her too. The couple got engaged, and their life together became lively and joyful. Eventually, Molly said that she missed her homeland and wanted to leave Ireland, suggesting that the family moved to the United States. Jason's family then moved to North Carolina, where they bought a house. The wedding took place on June 4, 2011, in Nishi. Molly's father, Thomas Martins, escorted her down the aisle. While Jack and Sarah carried the ring and flowers, the photos taken that day capture the joyful atmosphere. However, there are some important details to consider. Molly claimed to her friends that she and Margaret were friends before Margaret's death. This is not true, as Margaret died in 2006, and Molly did not know Jason or his wife before that. Molly's tendency to spread misinformation is worrying. During the wedding, she also threw a tantrum over the McDonald's food Jason's nephew was eating. The boy had food allergies and could not eat from the communal table. One of the guests noticed this, went to McDonald's, and bought the child some snacks. This angered Molly, who reacted violently and lost her temper several times. Years later, Jason's family still lives in North Carolina, and the kids call Molly Mommy. Molly works part-time as a swim instructor and spends most of her free time at home with the kids. Meanwhile, Jason works long hours as a manager at a packaging plant. The couple has made many new friends, and Jason is well liked for his kindness and friendliness. He is often seen chatting with neighbors or hanging out with friends. Although things seem to be going well for them, there are actually some underlying problems in their marriage. One of the biggest problems is that Molly wants to adopt a child, but Jason is against the idea. He refuses his wife's request, not out of anger, but perhaps because he doubts the longevity of their relationship over time. Jason begins to seriously consider divorce and the possibility of moving back to Ireland with his son and daughter. Realizing that their relationship is not healthy, Jason hid the children's passports. Worried that she might take them away, Molly sought legal advice about her parental rights in the event of a divorce. As she was not the biological mother of their children, Molly then deliberately made a recording. On the advice of her lawyer during their argument, the recording was intended to prove that Jason was a bad or even abusive father, which would aid Molly's efforts to gain custody of Sarah and Jack to gather evidence. Molly secretly placed recording devices around the house to record Jason during one of his tantrums. As a result, she was left with audio files that portrayed him in a negative light. During one dinner, Molly deliberately provoked Jason, causing him to lose his temper, while she accused him of ignoring her and refusing to listen. This argument was recorded in front of their children, making Jason appear to be an abusive husband and father. On the morning of August 2, Molly's parents, Thomas and Sharon, traveled to North Carolina to visit family. They arrived late at 8:30 p.m. Just in time for dinner, they planned to give the children the gifts they had prepared the following morning. This was especially meaningful for Jack, who would receive a baseball bat, while Sarah would receive a tennis racket after dinner. Thomas and Sharon went to the guest bedroom in the basement, while Jason and Molly went to the master bedroom on the first floor. The children went to their room on the second floor, according to Molly. Sarah woke her up at 3 a.m. after having a nightmare. Molly then took Sarah to her room and covered her with a blanket. However, when Molly returned, Jason was awake and very angry. Apparently because he had been disturbed in the middle of the night, his anger caused a fight. Shortly after the fight allegedly began, Thomas heard strange noises coming from his daughter Molly's bedroom. Worried, he grabbed a baseball bat and entered the room. When he opened the door, he found Jason holding Molly by the neck. When he recognized Thomas, Jason grabbed Molly by the neck, dragging her into the bathroom. While threatening to kill her, Thomas begged Jason to let her go. But when he realized his pleas were in vain, he charged at Jason and knocked him to the ground after being beaten. Jason continued to strangle Molly. Thomas continued to beat Jason. Jason then released Molly to grab the bat and tried to pull it away. A struggle ensued, and Jason pushed Thomas, causing him to fall to the floor. Jason tried to grab the bat, and at that moment, Molly shouted angrily at Jason not to hurt her father, fearing that Jason might kill her father. Molly picked up a brick from the nightstand and smashed it into Jason's head. Molly and her father took turns attacking Jason until they realized he was dead. Thomas then called the police to report the incident. Thomas told the police that Jason had been fighting with his wife, and Thomas had intervened. Now, Jason was in dire need of help when the police and ambulance arrived at the scene. They found that the incident was much more brutal than self-defense. Jason had many serious injuries on his body. Thomas and Molly claimed that they had killed Jason to ensure that he no longer posed a threat. However, considering the severity of Jason's injuries, it appears that some of them occurred when Jason was no longer a threat. Fortunately, the children were asleep and did not hear the noise. The police removed them from the chaotic scene and placed them in a patrol car. One of the officers reported that when they found Molly, she was crying loudly but had no tears. She was rubbing her neck and said that her neck hurt because Jason had tried to strangle her. Aside from a small red mark on her throat, Molly had no other injuries, and neither did Thomas. Although he claimed that they had gotten into a violent fight over a baseball bat, Molly and Thomas were taken to the police station to give formal statements. Molly claimed that she and her father killed Jason in self-defense because he had attacked her. She explained that he had been drinking heavily that day and was angry when he was woken up in the night. Molly could not recall specific details after the initial brick attack, but insisted that everything she and her father did was in self-defense. She also claimed that she had been abused by her husband for years, but kept quiet for fear of losing custody of her children. The investigation found no evidence of physical abuse against Molly during her stay with Jason. Recordings from Molly showed that Jason had a bad temper, but he could not be considered cruel to his wife. Thomas's testimony was consistent with his daughter's. He also noted that Jason had been drunk that night. Thomas also claimed that Jason's first wife had died under suspicious circumstances, which was completely false and insulting. In fact, Jason's first wife had died of an asthma attack. As confirmed by medical experts, when Tracy heard about her brother Jason's death, she quickly flew to the United States to speak to the police. She expressed her belief that Molly may not have been completely truthful in her account, and the police shared her suspicions. Tracy confirmed that her brother had intended to divorce Molly and move back to Ireland with the children. This could have been a motive for the murder. On August 3, the day after Jason's death, an autopsy was performed. Medical experts found that Jason had died from blunt force trauma to the head, including multiple lacerations, abrasions, and bruises, along with severe skull fractures from blunt force trauma. The injuries were so severe that the medical examiner was unable to determine exactly how many times he had been hit, but it was clear that he had been hit at least 12 times. Then a shocking analysis by a toxicologist, Molly claimed that Jason had been drinking all day, but tests showed that his blood alcohol level was very low. What was particularly strange was that traces of antidepressants were found in his system. The medication had been prescribed to Molly just days before Jason's death. Additionally, Jason had recently told his doctor that he was experiencing sudden, unexplained anger, although this has not been confirmed. Jason's family members suspect that Molly may have given him his drugs during this time. The children were placed in temporary care of Molly's brother. However, on August 3, Jack and Sarah were brought in to speak to social workers. It is hoped that the children may provide insight into their parents' dysfunctional marriage. Jack and Sarah revealed that their father was always angry and even hurt Molly. Additionally, Jack revealed important information about a brick on the nightstand in the master bedroom that had not been there before. The police were surprised, but Molly explained that she and the children had planned to paint the brick and place it outside. Apparently, the family had an artistic agenda, and Molly had brought the brick into the house after it had rained. However, one has to wonder why she did not leave it in the hallway or by the door. Instead, it was in the bedroom, right next to the bed, which seemed odd. Shortly thereafter, Molly sought custody of Jack and Sarah, alleging that Tracy had attempted to kidnap the children. This request granted her temporary custody, however. The details of the alleged kidnapping were unclear. A hearing was held to resolve the matter, and custody was eventually awarded to Tracy and her husband. According to Jason's will, the conflict between Molly and Jason's family was extremely tense regarding the handling of Jason's remains. Molly wanted him cremated immediately, while Tracy wanted his body returned to Ireland for burial. Molly eventually agreed to the burial, but only if her sister paid for the entire funeral expenses. Jason's body was then returned to his homeland. Initially, Jason's family was very worried that Thomas and Molly would avoid responsibility, but they were arrested. On December 18, 2015, a grand jury indicted Thomas Martins and Molly Martins on charges of second-degree murder and negligent manslaughter. Neither of them admitted guilt. A joint trial was set for June 2017. Before the trial, Molly gave an interview to a television channel in which she reiterated her claims of Jason's abuse and asserted her innocence in his death. However, at this point, Jack and Sarah changed their original statements. They claimed that their father was not abusive and that they had been coerced into lying. This development further complicated the situation, as no testimony from the children was considered admissible in court, giving neither the prosecution nor the defense an advantage. Both sides presented forensic evidence in court, including crime scene photographs and medical evidence, to prove that Jason had been brutally murdered. The prosecution pointed to Jason's $600 life insurance policy and pointed out that he had not formally adopted Molly, suggesting a strong motive for the crime. The defense portrayed Jason as a terrible person and a cruel husband. Molly chose not to speak in her defense, which may have worked in her favor. The trial lasted until August 9, 2017, and after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Molly Martins and Thomas Martins guilty and sentenced them to 20 to 25 years in prison. A week later, Thomas and Molly filed an appeal, arguing that the jury had acted improperly. Specifically, they pointed out that immediately after the trial, a juror had spoken to a member of the press, which they found unacceptable. On December 1, 2017, they filed an appeal to the North Carolina Supreme Court, and in early 2021, they were successful. Thomas and Molly were released on $200 bail and left the Davidson County Jail within an hour of each other. Following their release, there was reasonable speculation about a potential settlement. However, the father and daughter maintained their innocence. Their retrial in October 2023, Thomas Martins and Molly Martins entered into a plea agreement for manslaughter after their guilty pleas. Davidson Superior Court Judge David Hall sentenced Molly and Thomas to between 51 and 74 months in prison. They have already served 44 months, and each person will only spend 7 months in prison for good behavior. Jack and Sarah are now young adults. Their aunt, Tracy, and uncle, David, adopted them and moved to Ireland. With Tracy's guidance, Sarah wrote a series of children's books aimed at helping children cope with the loneliness of losing a loved one. Going through their parents' divorce, Jack has become a singer-songwriter and is also a keen rugby player. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sajini. In December 2002, Thurun Jinnaraj and Sajini Krishnan, a newlywed couple, started their life together. Thurun and Sajini's marriage was arranged, but the couple was very happy and were building a life together in their apartment. Thurun, a physical education teacher at a local school and a volleyball coach, his wife, Sajini, worked at a bank. Whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball, he would remind his wife, Sajini, that due to the unsafe burglary situation in the area, Sajini should go to her father's house instead of staying alone in their apartment. Sajini's father lived nearby, so she would go to her father's house whenever Thurun went to watch volleyball. On February 5, 2003, Sajini visited her father's house for the last time. Before leaving, she said that she needed money to fill up her car's gas tank. Sajini's father was surprised and asked if Thurun was taking good care of her. Sajini appeared angry and dismissed her father's concerns, saying, "Dad, there's no such thing." Her short reply made her father feel uncomfortable, thinking that it might just be a minor disagreement between the couple. On February 14, 2003, at 7:30 p.m., Sajini had a phone conversation with her sister that lasted about 15 minutes. 2 hours later, at about 9:30 p.m., Thurun contacted Sajini's father, informing him to come to the hospital immediately because Sajini's condition was critical. Family members rushed to the hospital and found that Sajini had passed away. Thurun was deeply moved and cried loudly. Sajini's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a scarf. When the police arrived at the scene, Thurun reported that their house had been broken into, jewelry and money had been stolen, and belongings had been thrown around. Initially, the police suspected that the thieves might have killed Sajini when she discovered them. Thurun's emotional state was so shocked that he couldn't stop crying. His pain was too great, and as a result, his condition worsened. He was so distraught that he couldn't even attend Sajini's funeral. Due to his deteriorating condition, Thurun was hospitalized, where his family provided him with emotional support. Meanwhile, the police were working to identify potential suspects by compiling a list of known thieves in the area. On February 16, 2003, 2 days after Sajini's death, Thurun's brother contacted the police, informing them that Thurun had escaped from the hospital. The police were shocked to find that Thurun had escaped from the hospital. Initially, they had assumed that Thurun was completely innocent due to his poor condition, so the police did not assign anyone to closely monitor Thurun while he was in the hospital. However, Thurun's sudden disappearance aroused the police's suspicions. Sajini's family began questioning the police, demanding to know why they had let their guard down and allowed Thurun to escape. As the case attracted widespread media attention, the pressure on the police increased. They immediately launched a thorough search for Thurun. Meanwhile, Thurun's family was also brought in for questioning by the police, but they were released after a few days. Thurun lived with Sajini in an apartment, while the rest of his family lived elsewhere. A massive search operation was launched across the city to find Thurun. The police set up roadblocks at several locations. Despite these efforts, Thurun remained undetected. Pressure from Sajini's family on the police led to the announcement of a large reward for anyone providing information on Thurun's whereabouts. However, even this lucrative offer failed to yield any leads. Police searches were ultimately unsuccessful. It was later revealed that Thurun had been mistreating Sajini since their marriage, motivated by his extramarital affair with another woman. The police eventually tracked down the girl Thurun had been involved with. She told them that on February 16th, Thurun had called her and asked her to marry him. However, she had already learned about Sajini's death by then. As a result, she rejected Thurun's proposal outright, telling him she couldn't marry someone suspected of murder. After that, Thurun and the girl lost contact. Nearly 6 years passed without any update on Thurun from the police. The police kept a close watch on Thurun's family, thinking that he might contact or return home. However, Thurun did not see or contact his family during this time. The police discovered that exactly 6 years after the incident, Thurun had visited his parents in another state, but only briefly, as his father had passed away just a day later. Although the police expected Thurun to return for his father's funeral, Thurun did not return. In 2016, a new officer joined the department and reviewed the case file, asking for an update. The police informed him of the current situation, that Thurun's father had passed away, his mother was ill and living in Madhya Pradesh, and his brother lived in Ahmedabad, but there was still no information about Thurun's whereabouts. The police conducted another investigation by discreetly monitoring the area around Thurun's mother's house, looking for any young men who might visit her. Unfortunately, no leads were found. The police then decided to question the girl who had a relationship with Thurun. She reported that she had not had any contact with Thurun since the incident. However, some of her friends had recently mentioned to her that they thought they saw someone who looked like Thurun at a mall in Delhi. The police formed a team to investigate this new information and visited the mall in Delhi. They checked the footage from all the surveillance cameras, but could not find any evidence of Thurun. After receiving multiple reports of sightings of Thurun in various states, the police became increasingly convinced that he was still alive. They therefore launched a thorough investigation by analyzing around 4,000 mobile phone numbers linked to Thurun's family and friends, hoping to uncover a vital clue. Although their search did not yield any significant breakthroughs, the police were determined to find Thurun. They kept a close watch on his mother's phone, scrutinizing her calls to identify her contacts. Thurun's mother received a call on her mobile phone from a landline number in Bengaluru, also known as the Silicon Valley of India. The call originated from the customer care service of a Bengaluru-based Oracle company. This made the police wonder about the connection between Thurun's mother and the Oracle company. The police suspected that Thurun, whom they were looking for, might be working at the Oracle office in Bengaluru. A police team traveled from Ahmedabad to Bengaluru to investigate further. On October 22, 2018, police visited the Oracle office and met the HR department, but police did not disclose the real purpose of their visit. Instead, they informed the HR department that police needed a list of all employees for law and order purposes. The HR department cooperated and provided the police with a complete list of all Oracle employees. In order to avoid being detected by Thurun, the police had to be extremely careful in their approach, as they knew that Thurun would likely escape if he realized that the police were following him. The problem was, Thurun's name was not on the list that Oracle had provided to the police. This made them worry that their efforts might be in vain. However, one name on the list stood out: Parvin Batelli. When the police recalled that Thurun's mother often spoke to Parvin and his wife, Nisha, this connection piqued the police's interest, and they decided to gather more information about Parvin and Nisha in the hope of finding clues about Thurun. The police found it suspicious that Parvin and Nisha were not active on social media, as this is a rare phenomenon in today's digital age, when most people actively share their lives on social media. The police learned that Thurun's mother frequently talked to Parvin Batelli. In addition, Parvin and Nisha had 2 children. The police began to suspect that Parvin Batelli could be Thuran. Therefore, the police began to collect evidence against him. One feature of Thuran's finger during his time as a volleyball coach was a broken and slightly bent finger on his ring hand. On October 23rd, two policemen went to Oracle's customer service office in Bangalore to meet Parvin. When one of the policemen shook hands with Parvin, the policeman immediately recognized Thuran because of the familiar broken finger. The policeman said, "Thuran, your game is over." Upon hearing Thuran's name, Parvin's condition worsened. Thuran's mistake began when his cell phone stopped working, leaving him worried about his mother. Thuran used his office landline instead of a number he could safely use to contact his mother. This last mistake led to his arrest. If he had not used his office landline, the police likely would not have found him. Thuran was taken to Ahmedabad by the police, where he confessed to the crime, admitting to killing his wife Sajini Krishnan. Thuran shared the entire story with the police. After the murder, Thuran proposed to a friend but was rejected. He then moved to Pune, took up a small job, and met Nisha. Thuran tricked Nisha into believing that he was an orphan with no family, after which the two got married. The couple moved to Bangalore in 2009, where Thuran began working for Oracle. After years of investigation and manhunt, Thuran Jinaraj was finally recaptured in 2019. In March 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ekaterina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ekaterina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ekaterina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ekaterina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ekaterina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ekaterina. In 2017, Ekaterina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ekaterina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ekaterina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ekaterina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ekaterina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ekaterina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ekaterina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ekaterina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ekaterina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ekaterina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ekaterina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ekaterina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ekaterina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ekaterina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ekaterina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologist deemed severe. Although Katerina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Katerina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Katerina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Katerina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Katerina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Katerina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Katerina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Katerina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Katerina for 2 days. Katerina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Katerina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Katerina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, The fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Katarina Bauman. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Katarina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Katarina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Katarina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Katarina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Bauman, Walter's mother. The white jacket Katarina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Katarina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Katarina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Katarina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Katarina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Katarina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Katarina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Bauman made a shocking statement, claiming she took Katarina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Katarina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Katarina hit her, Ludmila choked Katarina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Katarina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Katerina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter, who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brandon Duran. Brandon Duran was born in 1980 in San Diego, California, to a father who was a passionate motorcyclist and a former member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, considered a criminal organization by the FBI. When Brandon was around 10 years old, his parents divorced, but they maintained a good relationship and shared responsibilities in raising their son. Brandon inherited his father's love for motorcycles and at 25 built his own bike from scratch, which became a treasured possession. He socialized with other bikers but never joined a motorcycle club. However, his life took a dramatic turn when his father unexpectedly passed away in April 2005, plunging Brandon into depression. To overcome his grief, Brandon decided to make a change in his life and embarked on a road trip to Las Vegas on his motorcycle. During his year-long stay in Vegas, he met Amber Andrews, 24, and they fell deeply in love. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage just 2 months later, and Amber became pregnant soon after. In December 2006, Amber gave birth to their son, Brando. The arrival of his son marked a significant transformation in Brandon's life. He became a devoted father and husband, prioritizing his family over his personal interests and securing a high-paying job. Amber failed to prioritize her new role as a mother, instead continuing to frequent biker gatherings and parties. This led to a rapid deterioration in the young family's relationships, with fights becoming increasingly common. The inevitable outcome was divorce, filed just 4 years after their wedding. Brandon was granted full custody of their child due to his ability to provide for himself and his son, unlike Amber. After the divorce was finalized in 2010, Amber returned to her hometown in Oklahoma, while Brandon went back to San Diego with their son. There, he was reunited with his family, who helped him raise his child. As time passed, Brandon's emotional wounds from the failed marriage began to heal, and he became optimistic about the future. However, in the summer of 2012, Amber unexpectedly showed up at his doorstep, asking for a second chance at their relationship. Brandon's long-suppressed feelings resurfaced, and he chose to believe in Amber's sincerity, agreeing to give their relationship another try. With their son Brando set to start kindergarten in September, Amber requested that the three of them visit her parents in Oklahoma, who were eager to see their grandson. Brandon consented, and they began preparing for the trip, planning to stay in Oklahoma for about a week. A few days before Brandon, Amber and their son were due to return to San Diego, Van Emblem reached out to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. He reported that his friend and employer, 30-year-old Justin Hammer from Garvin County, had asked for his help in disposing of a body, claiming it was that of Brandon Duran. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation alerted the local sheriff, who immediately visited Hammer's ranch with his assistant. They also contacted Brandon's relatives in San Diego, who informed them that they had been unable to reach Brandon for several days. Once this information was confirmed, the authorities decided not to share the details of the case with Brandon's family. Justin Hammer unexpectedly confessed to killing Brandon Duran when questioned by detectives. However, he claimed it was self-defense, saying that Brandon, a member of a dangerous motorcycle gang, had come to his house on August 7th, kicked in the door, and threatened him. According to Hammer, Brandon was angry about his relationship with Amber and threatened to harm him and his family if he didn't stay away from her. Hammer said he grabbed a nearby shotgun and fired it, killing Brandon. Fearing retaliation from the motorcycle club, Hammer did not call the police and instead hid the evidence. He dismembered Brandon's body in the bathroom using a saw, then put the remains in 5-gallon buckets filled with cement. Hammer needed help loading the heavy buckets into his pickup truck, so he asked his friend Van for assistance. After they loaded the buckets, Van left and reported Hammer to the police. Hammer's ranch had a small pond where he disposed of the buckets after handling the body. He then cleaned the house and later burned the cleaning supplies, gloves, and rags. According to Hammer, he gave Brandon's motorcycle to a relative who unknowingly received the bike and dismantled it for spare parts. The police investigation led to the discovery of 5 buckets at the bottom of the pond. When the officers informed Amber about Brandon's death, she was shocked. She revealed that although she and Brandon were divorced, they had planned to reunite. Amber also confessed to having fought with Brandon the day before his death, following his discovery of her affair with Justin Hammer. This new information prompted the investigators to focus on Amber. She claimed that Brandon left on his motorcycle after their argument, but his family said it was broken. The question arose, if the motorcycle wasn't severely damaged, why would Brandon take it to Oklahoma for repairs instead of fixing it locally? Amber's story about her whereabouts on the day of Brandon's death raised suspicions. She claimed to have a doctor's appointment, but the police couldn't find any records of her visiting a medical facility that day. This meant she had no alibi for the time of Brandon's death. Detectives later found out that Amber had asked a friend to watch her son that day. When the friend arrived at 3 p.m., Amber and Brandon left the house together in Brandon's pickup truck, which had a motorcycle in the back. Amber left her phone behind and didn't return for 8 hours. When she finally came back, Brandon and the motorcycle were no longer with the truck. On Amber's phone, investigators discovered a message from Justin Hammer sent just before she and Brandon left the house, which read, "The ink is ready." The police thought this was a code, indicating that everything was in place to deal with Brandon. After talking to Amber's close friends, detectives learned that she had no interest in getting back together with her ex-husband and often spoke negatively about him. She was bitter about Brandon having full custody of their son and resented him. New evidence emerged that contradicted Amber's account. Forensic analysis confirmed that Amber had written the suspicious note found in Hammer's safe, which listed items necessary for disposing of a body. Furthermore, footage from the local hardware store's CCTV cameras revealed that the crime was premeditated. The footage showed Hammer purchasing buckets and other items from Amber's list the day before Brandon's murder. Despite this, Hammer claimed during his trial that he had acted alone in self-defense. attempting to shield Amber from suspicion. He asserted that the items on the list were actually for home repairs, not for getting rid of the body. Justin Hammer claimed to have used two weapons during the crime, holding a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other. However, investigators found this statement suspicious and unlikely. The trial, expected to last several weeks, surprisingly ended with the jury deliberating for only an hour and a half. They returned with a recommended sentence of life in prison without parole. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Austin expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating it was a fitting punishment and brought justice to Brandon Duran's family. She believed the sentence was appropriate. Cindy Ware, Brandon's mother, was overjoyed with the jury's decision and acknowledged that it must have been a difficult one to make. She had been hoping for this outcome for 2 years. In October 2014, Justin Hammer was formally sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 months later, his wife Amber was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of her ex-husband, desecrating his remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Despite pleading not guilty, Amber was denied bail. Amber sat in the courtroom, handcuffed and dressed in a light purple inmate suit, expressing frustration that it had taken 32 months to be reunited with her son. She had only just been allowed to return home to him a month prior, and she was desperate to stay with him until the trial. However, District Judge Jeff Virgin of Norman, Oklahoma, denied her request for bail, agreeing with the prosecution's argument that the seriousness of the allegations against her made her a flight risk. The trial, which began in the spring of 2017, was a long time coming. Over 2 years had passed since Amber was charged. She maintained her innocence, with her lawyers claiming she was not present at the crime scene. Conversely, prosecutors Christy Miller and Jennifer Austin argued that Andrews had the strongest motive to kill Brandon Duran. Miller testified that Amber Andrews was the only person with a motive to want him gone, as she needed him to disappear in order to regain custody of their son. According to Miller, Amber had a strong reason to want him out of the way, and Hammer had a place where the crime could be committed. They thought they had come up with the perfect plan. The prosecutor explained that Amber's motive was to get rid of Duran so she could regain custody of their young son. He pointed out that Amber had been absent from home for 8 hours on the day of Brandon's death, and there was no evidence to support her alibi. The prosecutor suggested that Amber had helped Hammer get rid of the body and clean up the house, neglecting her parental responsibilities in the process. However, the defense attorney Jay Mendros argued that the prosecutor's office had not provided any evidence linking Amber to the crime. He told the jurors that when there is no evidence, the prosecution resorts to attacking Amber's character. According to Mendros, the state's case was based on a theory, but there was no concrete evidence to support it. Mendros claimed that Amber was not capable of planning a murder and that Justin, who was afraid of losing her, had committed the crime. Mendros described the situation as a recipe for disaster, with Duran visiting Oklahoma to rekindle his romance with Amber, while Hammer, who had been Amber's boyfriend for a year, feared losing her to Duran. The defense attorney portrayed the case as a tragic love triangle, where Justin Hammer had a strong motive to kill Brandon Duran, as he was torn between his feelings for Amber and the threat Duran posed. The attorney argued that Amber had been emotionally involved with both men and had oscillated between them, making it difficult to pinpoint her true intentions. The prosecution's case relied on twisted and distorted statements that created a sinister impression in an attempt to imprison someone based on speculation and rumors. The attorney emphasized that, in the American justice system, people are not convicted on assumptions. There must be concrete evidence, and in this case, there was none to suggest that Amber was a co-conspirator or a murderer. Justin Hammer had confessed to the murder, taking full responsibility for the crime. However, during the trial, it was Amber Andrews who was found guilty of the crime. The jurors delivered a guilty verdict after hearing closing arguments, recommending a life sentence for the 35-year-old. Amber appeared in court on June 12, 2017, seemingly in a good mood, awaiting sentencing. Brandon's mother, Cindy Ware, took the stand, overcome with emotion, to share how her son's murder had impacted her and her grandson, Brando. Cindy placed a photo of Duran next to the stand and expressed how Amber had shattered all her dreams. She stated that Brandon's only wish was to be with his family, and Amber had brutally taken that away from him. Cindy sorrowfully reflected on the memories they would never create, such as Brandon teaching Brando how to snowboard and the bright smile that would never again light up a room. Before the judge's final decision, defense attorney Jay Mendros addressed the court once more. He maintained that there was still no concrete evidence linking Amber to the murder and requested that the judge dismiss the jury's guilty verdict and restart the case. Mendros argued that the prosecution's case lacked credible evidence and relied heavily on emotional manipulation to sway the jurors. In essence, the state built a case against Amber based on speculation and gut feelings, rather than concrete proof. The prosecution's strategy was to shock and outrage the jurors, rather than present tangible evidence. As a result, Amber was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the first-degree murder of Brandon Duran, plus additional time for desecrating human remains and conspiring to commit a felony. Meanwhile, Justin Hammer is currently serving his sentence at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, while Amber Andrews is incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma. Brandon Duran has been in the care of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services since August 7, 2012, living with a foster family. In January 2013, Brando was finally allowed to return to San Diego to live with his grandmother, Cindy, after a long and difficult court battle. However, this was not the end of the fight. It took Cindy 5 more years to gain full legal custody of Brando. Once the custody battle was over, Cindy and her relatives sat down with Brando to explain the truth about the verdict and what had happened to his mother. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of John Thomas McGuire. Life in an orphanage is difficult and unpredictable. You have no personal space, no control over your time, and if you're not able to stand up for yourself, you're likely to be bullied by the older kids. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure, however, were a little more fortunate because they had each other. With 2 of them, they were more able to defend themselves. The sisters preferred to keep to themselves and didn't try to make friends with anyone else. They were hopeful that their stay in the orphanage would be short-lived. They believed that their mother would soon find out that their father, Larry McClure, was in prison and that she would come to take them away. It was impossible to keep their father's imprisonment a secret. The news was all over TV and in the newspapers for a long time. As time passed, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Unfortunately, it became clear that they might not be returning home anytime soon. One day, the sisters intervened to protect a new girl, Meredith, from being bullied. Meredith had a difficult past, having lived with a mother who was addicted to drugs. She was very thin, scared, and would jump at the slightest noise. After her mother died of an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and ended up in the orphanage. Amanda and Anna Marie kept the reason for their presence a secret, brushing it off when Meredith asked about it with a fabricated story about a policeman father who died in the line of duty. However, the truth eventually emerged that their father was not a deceased police officer, but a living criminal serving time in prison for violent sexual crimes against a young girl. This revelation made their lives a living hell. Luckily, the sisters soon got a second chance when 2 separate families adopted them almost simultaneously, allowing them to start anew. Unfortunately, this meant they would be separated and lose touch with each other. There is no information available about the sisters' experiences in their foster homes. What is known is that Amanda, 29 at the time, met her future husband, John McGuire, now 38. Her adoptive parents had worried that Amanda would remain single forever, given her lack of biological family and the emotional trauma of her mother's betrayal. Larry McClure, the father, was released on parole and returned to Virginia, where he lived in a mobile home. He was determined to reconnect with his daughters. First, he visited Amanda's foster parents, Guam and Alex, and introduced himself, asking to see Amanda and requesting her contact information. At the time, Larry was dishonest about Anna Marie's whereabouts, claiming she lived in North Carolina, 186 miles away, when in fact, he had never seen or spoken to her. Despite this, Larry was able to meet with Amanda, and their reunions eventually led to him introducing her and her friend John to illegal drugs that he manufactured in his camper. The tragic events unfolded on Valentine's Day. John, who was still recovering from the effects of drug abuse and was deeply in love with Amanda, decided to surprise her with a romantic evening at home. However, during the meal, John's affectionate words to Amanda made Larry extremely anxious, causing tension to build. Larry stopped his son-in-law John from speaking and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife Amanda. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. John's legs were tied, and he was asked to answer all questions about his life truthfully. At first, the questions were harmless, but as Larry became more intoxicated, he started accusing John of being an undercover FBI agent. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To keep their relationship a secret, Larry changed his name. The new family decided to start fresh in Kentucky, vowing to quit illegal substances for good. To blend in with their neighbors, they even hung a U.S. flag on their rented house's door. By 2019, John's family, including his ex-wife and parents, had become worried because they hadn't heard from him. John's mother even went so far as to file a missing person report with the police. Meanwhile, Larry was in trouble with the law again. He had failed to notify the authorities that he had moved to a different state, which violated the terms of his probation. As a result, he was sent back to prison. Larry's mental state had deteriorated significantly due to his long history of substance abuse and mixing drugs with alcohol. Suddenly finding himself in a place where he couldn't access these substances triggered withdrawal symptoms, including increased anxiety and a blurred sense of reality. It's likely that this led him to make irrational decisions, such as marrying his own daughter. Larry became convinced that the real reason for his parole violation was to search for John's body, which he believed was buried in his backyard. He urgently needed to get a message to his daughters, Ploddard, Amanda, or Anna Marie, to dig up the body parts and rebury them in a different location. However, all prison calls are monitored, so he had to find a way to convey this information discreetly. Larry meticulously prepared a speech, considering every detail, but was prohibited from making any phone calls. Despite this, he eventually couldn't resist and confessed to the duty officer, although his intentions remain unclear. Larry's reasoning was that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty, and if he implicated his daughters, that would be even better. However, the officer was initially skeptical, wondering what Larry was talking about. Why would this addict incriminate himself? Nevertheless, the officer was required by law to investigate Larry's claims. Initially, the officer intended to perform a cursory verification, simply confirming that a statement had been made and the alleged crime scene had been checked, but finding nothing. However, it was discovered that John was indeed missing, and as a precaution, a police unit was sent to Larry's residence. Upon searching the area, they found traces of lime, just as Larry had mentioned, and soon every aspect of his confession was corroborated. The McClure sisters were promptly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were stunned when their father and husband, Larry, confessed to a brutal murder. Their shock turned to disbelief when Larry tried to shift the blame, testifying that his daughters were responsible for the crime and he was an unwitting participant. As the family's story unraveled, each member attempted to distance themselves from the crime, claiming it was an accident. John's relatives were especially grief-stricken. as they had to come to terms with the fact that his body was never found, only remains. These remains had to be retrieved from forensic experts and transported to his parents for burial in a closed coffin. Despite the challenges, John's parents were able to lay him to rest, thanks to the help of friends who contributed financially, assisted with transportation, and made funeral arrangements. John was finally laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted a message on John's Facebook page, pretending it was from him. The message said he was going on a trip and would be out of touch for a long time, and asked his friends not to worry about his extended absence. This was a tactic to mislead everyone, as the family knew they were about to kill John and didn't want to arouse suspicion. Despite the heinous nature of their crime, during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their incestuous marriage, which is illegal in their state. The trial began, and Larry was given the floor. He stated that he had felt remorse for his own children for most of his life. He admitted that when they were very young, he had committed a serious crime that put them in an orphanage. He explained that their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one who had a heartache for his little ones. He expressed his extreme gratitude to the people who had adopted his babies. He said he would not hide, and even attended churches and prayed for their adoptive parents when he got out. He confessed that he had crazily wanted to make up for all the years he had missed. He confessed that he could have walked away from the crime if he had convinced Amanda not to do it, but he didn't. He admitted that the judge and jury would probably not understand him, and he shared their point of view, but emphasized that they weren't in his shoes. He mentioned that John was a fine young man and expressed his regret for John. He stated that if he could, he would turn things around, but no one could raise the dead, and he couldn't say no to Amanda, his favorite and youngest daughter, who didn't care about John. All Amanda wanted was to be able to withdraw government money from John's account. The trial went on for a very long time as the defendants flip-flopped back and forth on the decision to kill John. Amanda, who could not tolerate such a long trial, even made a deal with the investigators where she was promised to be charged with involuntary manslaughter at the next trial. Larry had given a very different speech when it all started, stating that the four of them had bought the ingredients to make illegal substances and went back to his trailer where he had started making them. Amanda had come up to him and said she wanted to get back at John. He explained that John, under the influence of drugs, had raped Anna Marie, who then got pregnant, and that he had to earn the trust of his daughters after all those years apart, so he couldn't refuse. Larry blamed himself for that and thought every day that he should hang himself, but questioned why it should be him if the crime was their fault. After Larry's speech, John's family got the floor. His mother sobbed non-stop, so much so that she couldn't say a word. She expressed that even if she could ever forgive the McClure family, she would never be able to forget what happened. She also conveyed that she wished she could live to see the day when one of them died before her. John's children were given a chance to speak, and they vehemently cursed the killers, declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge then delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without parole. When Amanda's punishment was announced, her adoptive parents were filled with regret, revealing to her that her biological father had been searching for her. They had raised her to have freedom of choice, but unaware that this freedom could have such severe consequences on her future. Amanda, however, shifted the blame to her biological father, claiming that his jealousy had driven her to commit the crime. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider the negative influence of her biological father, arguing that their adopted daughter would not have committed such a brutal crime without it. Nevertheless, the prosecutors viewed the murder as a premeditated conspiracy, orchestrated so that Amanda and Larry could be together as a couple. The first hearing focused on Amanda, who received a 40-year sentence. However, the judge predicted she would likely serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's hearing, she attempted to demonstrate her opposition to John's murder, but felt coerced by her father and sister to see it through. She only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of fear for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano was born on November 30th, 1997 in northeastern Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of two children to Eggy Dero and Tony Mano, with an older brother named Alessandro. Although her parents divorced when she and her brother were young, her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support and staying in touch. During her school years, Celeste was outgoing, active, and popular. She participated in sports and dance, led the cheerleading team, and had ambitious plans for her future. Initially, she aimed to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, as she neared graduation, she found law unfulfilling and switched her focus to advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a large e-commerce company that sold various products online. Celeste, a highly intelligent and talented individual, rapidly advanced in her career, going from a call center worker to a department head in under 2 years. Her exceptional abilities, initiative, and organizational skills earned her widespread admiration from colleagues. Besides her professional prowess, Celeste was also known for her stunning physical appearance, having been a participant in her university's beauty contest. With many admirers since her youth, Celeste was cautious in selecting partners. One such admirer was Lou Nader, a 16-year-older colleague who showed strong interest in her from the moment she joined the company. Notably, Lou was a reserved and unsociable person who lacked career ambitions, content with his long-held minor position. Celeste, a kind and smiling person, consistently turned down Louis's requests to go out with her, always doing so politely to avoid hurting his feelings. Despite this, Louis continued to try to get her attention through various means. To lighten the mood, Celeste would occasionally make jokes, but she remained firm in her decision to not pursue anything with him. Louis, however, misinterpreted her behavior as a challenge and believed that Celeste was simply playing hard to get, vowing to win her over no matter what. Louis's persistent attention was awkward, annoying, and refused to fade. Celeste maintained her composure, hoping that he would eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, as time went on, Louis became increasingly obsessed with Celeste, and his infatuation did not go unnoticed by those around them. One day, Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a relationship with Louis, citing 3 reasons: his peculiar and unpredictable nature, his lack of ambition and life goals, and their significant age difference. Celeste's admirer, Louis, made the fatal mistake of neglecting his work duties in his fruitless attempts to win her attention and affection. As a result, his productivity plummeted, and he received 3 reprimands and warnings from senior management. Eventually, he was dismissed from his job in early autumn 2019. When Louis was fired, he was devastated and on the verge of tears as he packed up his belongings in the office. Celeste, on the other hand, felt relieved that the unwanted suitor would no longer be a nuisance, but she also felt guilty, thinking that her rejection had contributed to his downfall. Mano, the department manager, thanked Louis for his years of service, escorted him out of the building, and offered him words of encouragement and luck before parting ways. Louis misinterpreted Celeste's reaction to his sudden kiss as a sign that she had feelings for him, despite her clear discomfort. He convinced himself that she was hesitant to pursue an office romance due to her position as his boss, and that their social differences were the only obstacle to their happiness. Emboldened by this mistaken belief, Louis decided to take matters into his own hands. After being fired, he created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. When she initially accepted, he began sending her multiple requests to meet up, which she first tried to politely decline before eventually blocking him. Celeste's former colleague sent her another friend request on social media, this time from a new profile. Despite her attempts to ignore him, he began commenting on her photos, complimenting her appearance, and suggesting they would make a great couple. She tried to limit her profile settings to prevent this, but a week later, she was still harassed. During a family gathering, Celeste confided in her relatives about the unwelcome attention, sharing the strange incident that occurred on the day he was fired. Her family listened, but they didn't take it seriously, assuming the admirer would eventually lose interest and leave her alone. What they didn't know was that the harassment was about to escalate. Although Lou didn't have Celeste's personal phone number, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number. She knew exactly who was behind them. The unwanted admirer sent her romantic poems, admired her beauty, and continued to try to convince her to go out with him. Mato received repetitive calls from her stalker, and she decided to answer once to have a direct conversation with him. She explained that there was no possibility of a relationship between them and asked him to stop contacting her. However, the stalker ignored her words and instead complimented her voice, expressing his happiness that she had finally answered his call. After this incident, Mano tried to block his number, but the stalker continued to harass her by calling from different numbers. This pattern of harassment persisted for months, during which Mano attempted to ignore him by blocking his numbers and fake social media profiles and not responding to his messages. She tried to maintain her daily routine, but the stalker's messages continued, transitioning from romantic to bold and threatening in nature. Eventually, the stalker's messages evolved from requests to demands, as he insisted on meeting Mano and sharing his delusional fantasies about what he would do to her. Celeste's situation took a dark turn when she discovered that her stalker, Louis, had started following her from work to her home, learning her address. At first, she didn't realize that Louis was physically present in her life, not just sending messages. She would occasionally catch glimpses of him near her home, but convinced herself it was just her imagination and paranoia. It wasn't until she finally acknowledged the truth that Louis was indeed following her every move, driven by his obsessive behavior. Celeste then sought police protection, requesting a restraining order to keep the stalker away from her and her home. However, the police were uncooperative and dismissive of her concerns. According to them, Louis hadn't broken any laws since writing poems and sharing explicit fantasies and messages wasn't illegal. Without concrete evidence of Louis's stalking, the police brushed her off, telling her to leave the precinct and let them focus on catching real criminals. A restraining order was finally issued against Sacco, prohibiting him from contacting Celeste in any way. At first, he respected the order and disappeared from her life for a few weeks, giving Celeste a sense of freedom and relief. However, her peace was short-lived. Less than a month later, she started receiving messages from unknown numbers. Sacco was pleading and then demanding that she drop the restraining order, claiming it was interfering with their supposed romantic relationship. Celeste immediately reported these messages to the police, as Sacco was violating the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to harsher consequences, including possible jail time. After this incident, Sacco remained quiet for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe he had finally left her alone. During this time, Celeste met Chris Riedale, a young man who shared her interests, values, and goals. They quickly formed a romantic connection. Celeste opened up to her new boyfriend, Chris, about the harassment she had suffered at the hands of a former admirer. Although it had been over a month since she last heard from him, she still felt anxious about the situation. Chris was supportive and reassuring, doing everything he could to make her feel safe and cared for. As their relationship progressed, Celeste felt comfortable enough to introduce Chris to her family at a dinner gathering in early November. Her family welcomed him with open arms, and her mother even joked that Celeste was now in good hands. The next few weeks were peaceful, with no signs of the former admirer. Celeste was happy and carefree, spending all her free time with Chris. On November 15, 2020, the couple went on a date to a cafe where they enjoyed each other's company and decided to capture the moment by taking a selfie. The photo of the couple turned out to be very romantic, showing them sitting together, embracing and smiling happily. Celeste was so fond of this picture that she decided to use it as her social media profile picture, also wanting to share the news of her new relationship and indicate that things were getting serious. Chris also shared the photo on his page, accompanied by a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste and his desire to keep her happy. However, this outing would be the couple's last. Tragedy struck on the evening of their last date. After Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, they said their goodbyes and planned to meet again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour chatting with her mother in the kitchen about her boyfriend before going to bed, as she had to wake up early for work the next morning. But on November 16, 2020, around 4 a.m., disaster struck when Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Eggy was awoken by suspicious noises, followed by banging, screams, and commotion. At first, she thought the sounds were coming from outside, but soon realized they were inside her house. Panicked, she rushed to her daughter Celeste's room, throwing on her robe and jumping out of bed. When she opened the door, she saw someone fleeing the room through the broken window. She turned on the light to find her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and tiny shards of glass. Celeste struggled to breathe, her eyes wide open and staring upward. Eggy called emergency services and tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too late. By the time the police and doctors arrived, Celeste had passed away. The autopsy revealed over 20 stab wounds on her body, with a fatal blow to her heart. The police investigation concluded that the attack took less than 3 minutes, from the assailant breaking in through the window to the moment Eggy entered the room. Celeste was attacked with a large butcher's knife, and her attempts to defend herself left her arms with multiple cuts. When investigators asked her mother, Eggy, if Celeste had any enemies, she mentioned Louis Sacco, who had been stalking and harassing Celeste for over a year with frequent calls and threatening messages. Other family members, friends, and colleagues confirmed this information. At the crime scene, the attacker left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints and DNA evidence on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which also indicated that he had injured his hand. It was crucial to detain and question Louis immediately as the prime suspect and to verify all the evidence and witness statements. Louis was arrested on the same day, but he initially denied any involvement, claiming that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, forensic results soon confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in Celeste's room and on the fence belonged to Louis. Additionally, law enforcement discovered that Louis had violated a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Celeste. Furthermore, surveillance footage showed that Louis had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store on the evening before the attack. Louis committed a horrific crime. He used a hammer to break into a woman's house through her window and then fatally attacked her with a knife. Louis bought a knife and a hammer and then waited until nighttime to carry out his attack on Celeste's home. His actions seemed deliberate and premeditated, yet his behavior was also erratic, raising questions about his mental health. Notably, the 39-year-old man had never been married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and struggled to hold down a job. Louis was a nervous and introverted individual who struggled with social interactions. He also had a biological brother who was currently serving a long prison sentence for a crime. As a result, the court ordered a forensic psychiatric evaluation for Louis. His attorney argued that instead of imprisonment, Louis needed specialized treatment to address his mental health issues, which required professional attention. The victim's family was outraged by the argument that the criminal, Lewis, might avoid punishment by claiming insanity. However, psychiatric experts concluded that although Lewis suffered from mental disorders, he was fully aware of his actions during the crime and had even planned it in advance. As a result, Lewis was forced to stand trial, where he continued to claim that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. Despite his efforts, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 36 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The case highlighted the need for reform in Victoria's criminal laws, particularly regarding online stalking. Celeste, the victim, had reported Lewis to the police in 2020, but her complaint was not taken seriously because the law did not consider online harassment a crime. Her mother, Eggy, worked tirelessly to develop Celeste's Law, which would have introduced criminal liability for stalking on social networks. Although Eggy presented over 40 recommendations to the Legislative Commission, almost all were rejected. Research showed that most online stalkers do not escalate their behavior, and the resulting amendments only restricted access to confidential social media information and allowed restraining orders in severe cases. Unfortunately, stalkers still faced no criminal liability, and Celeste's Law was never enacted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegan. Jared Bridegan was born in 1989 in Florida to a modest family as the second of two sons. He and his older brother Adam were close from a young age and grew up together. Their parents were devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met Mallory Bowden at church, and they developed a romantic relationship. She would later call him her first true love. However, their religious beliefs discouraged cohabitation before marriage, so when Jared graduated from high school in 2007, they went their separate ways. He moved to Utah to attend college. In 2009, at the age of 20, Jared met his future first wife, Shannon Gardner, at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older than him and came from a wealthy family. Shannon Gardner was born in 1987 to Starling and Shelley Gardner, founders of Stampin' Up!, a successful company that produced and sold craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated $100 million in annual revenue. Shannon's sister, Sarah, holds a management position in the company. As a member of a wealthy family, Shannon grew up with luxuries and never had to work as a chef, despite being trained in the profession. After meeting her partner, they got engaged just a few months later and married in a lavish ceremony in Salt Lake City in early 2010, with her family covering all expenses. Their religious beliefs, which discouraged cohabitation and long engagements, influenced their quick decision to marry. After the wedding, they settled in Utah, where Shannon's parents helped them buy a comfortable home worth around $1 million. They, Shannon and Jared, traveled extensively, sharing their luxurious lifestyle on social media. They received significant financial support from Shannon's parents, who gave them around $10,000 monthly and allowed them to use their accounts freely. After Jared graduated, his in-laws gave him $100,000 to start his own business. In 2013, they had twins, Abigail and Liam, and initially moved to Connecticut. However, when Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues, they relocated to Florida, following doctors' advice that the sea air would be beneficial for his health. They bought a comfortable 2-story home near the coast in Ponte Vedra Beach. Shannon managed a popular blog, presenting herself as a devoted wife, caring mother, chef, and fitness enthusiast who loved travel and sports. She regularly visited the gym, prompting Jared to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. After moving, their marriage began to fall apart, and they soon found themselves in the midst of a scandalous divorce. Despite their efforts to put on a brave face, it was clear that their relationship was troubled. One of the main sources of tension was their differing levels of commitment to their religion. Shannon had grown disillusioned with their faith and stopped attending church, while her husband remained a devout follower. This disparity led to arguments, misunderstandings, and ultimately to the breakdown of their marriage. Shannon grew unhappy with Jared, feeling he was lazy, had gained weight, and wasn't putting enough effort into his business despite taking online courses. However, Jared eventually got a job at Microsoft and worked his way up to a senior manager role. Despite this success, the couple grew apart and started arguing frequently. Things took a turn for the worse when Jared found out about intimate messages between Shannon and her personal fitness trainer. Although Shannon denied having an affair, the trainer admitted to it in a conversation with Jared. Jared then reached out to Meller Bowden, saying his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her trainer, but he was willing to forgive her and save their family for the sake of their children. In 2015, after almost 6 years of marriage, the couple started a bitter and dramatic divorce process. They fought over their shared assets and custody rights for their children, with Jared accusing Shannon of infidelity, which she denied, saying the marriage had simply lost its spark. Shannon retaliated by accusing Jared of being cruel and offensive. Shannon and Jared disagreed on how to divide their assets, including their home, cars, and bank accounts. Shannon claimed that most of what they had was given to her by her parents or purchased with their money, since Jared had only recently started working. Jared argued that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home. The couple also disputed custody of their twins. Shannon accused Jared of trying to manipulate the children against her when he spent time with them, allegedly coaching them on what to say about her and recording their statements to use in court. In response, Jared accused Shannon of invading his privacy by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements with a GPS device in his car. Shannon sought full custody of the children and ownership of their seaside home. She claimed Jared threatened to use their children's trust funds for himself. Jared countered by accusing Shannon of tax evasion, alleging that she worked off the books at her parents' company and received large sums of money. After their divorce, Jared and Shannon continued to argue in court for nearly 7 years, despite having shared custody of their children. During this time, they both started new families and had more kids. Jared met Christina, a co-worker at Microsoft, in 2016. At first, their relationship was professional, but they eventually became romantically involved. Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared, and they got married in the fall of 2017. They had their first child, a daughter named Bexley, in February 2019, and their son London was born in August 2021. Shannon got married again in 2018 to Mario Fernandez, a real estate businessman who was 1 year younger than her. They had a son named Michael that same year. The family lived in the same house where Shannon used to live with her first husband, Jared, which was a point of contention during their court battles. Despite the new families, the conflicts between Jared and Shannon did not subside, and they continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared wanted to restrict Mario's access to the twins when Shannon was not around, while he wanted his new wife, Christina, to play a bigger role in raising his older children. The last court hearing between Jared and Shannon, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was extremely tense. They made more accusations against each other and fought over their property rights. Shannon claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's more comfortable vehicle to transport the children because he was more concerned with embarrassing her than with their convenience and safety. After the court granted Shannon exclusive rights to the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation, they established a routine for their children's care. As part of this agreement, Jared picked up their twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, which often included their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after having her baby, London, She prioritized spending time with him and avoided leaving him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed this routine, taking the children to Coastal Cafe after picking them up. After dinner and a walk, he dropped the twins back at their mother's house and headed home, taking his usual 40-minute route. This route included a stretch of road without streetlights that was quite deserted. As he drove cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter sleeping in her car seat, he encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. when the sun had set. Suddenly, in the headlights, he spotted a tire lying in his lane. Jared stopped his car to move a tire that was in the road, so he turned on his hazard lights and got out of the vehicle. That's when someone started shooting at him. The attacker was very close and shot Jared multiple times with deadly accuracy before running away. Luckily, the child who was sleeping in the car was not hurt. A person who was nearby heard the shots and carefully approached the scene. They found Jared lying on the ground, bleeding badly. They immediately called the police and ambulance, but unfortunately, it was too late to save Jared. Christina, Jared's wife, had spoken to him just minutes before the attack. He told her he had just dropped off their kids and would be home in about 15 minutes. But when 30 minutes passed, then an hour, and Jared didn't come home, Christina started to worry. She tried calling him again, but this time a police officer answered and told her what had happened. The officer asked Christina to come to the police station in Jacksonville Beach right away. The investigation at the scene revealed that a tire on the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. After getting out to remove the tire, he was shot. Fortunately, his 3-year-old daughter, who was sleeping in the car, was unharmed, suggesting she was not the shooter's target. The absence of stolen valuables, including a wallet with cash, phone, and tablet, ruled out robbery as a motive. When questioned about potential enemies, Christina mentioned Jared's first wife, Shannon, but declined to make accusations without solid evidence. Unfortunately, there was no surveillance footage due to the lack of cameras in the area. A witness reported hearing the shots, which broke the night's silence, followed by the sound of a vehicle speeding away, although nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's hint that Shauna might be involved in the crime seemed reasonable at first, but detectives doubted she was directly responsible, given her strong alibi. She was at home with her husband, their twins, younger son, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. Instead, the police focused on reviewing nearby surveillance footage. The cameras showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and reappearing a few minutes after the witness reported the shots. The police asked the public for help in identifying the suspicious vehicle. Jared's family made TV appeals, urging anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. The first suspect was arrested, but Shauna and her current husband Mario repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder when questioned by detectives. Shauna openly admitted that her relationship with her ex-husband was complex, but insisted she would never wish harm on the father of her children. In media interviews, she shared how her 9-year-old twins reacted to the news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. It's notable that neither Jared's ex-spouse nor his older children attended his funeral. This was because Christina had made it clear to Shanana that she was not welcome at the ceremony, and Shanana had countered that if she couldn't attend, the twins wouldn't go to the burial either. Almost a year after Mr. Brand's murder, the first suspect was finally arrested in January 2023. The police had been secretive about their investigation, only disclosing that it required significant resources and effort. However, their persistence paid off when the dark blue Ford F-150 was involved in an accident and fled the scene before the police arrived. This breakthrough led to an arrest. The police chief and city prosecutor announced that 62-year-old Henry Tienon, an unemployed man with a criminal record, had been charged with several crimes, including second-degree premeditated murder, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush that obstructed the victim. Tenon, hoping to receive a lighter sentence, agreed to cooperate with law enforcement and provide information about the crime. As a result, the criminal partnership began to fall apart, and news soon spread that Tenon had been renting a house with a friend owned by Mario Fernandez. After Tenon pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario, Mario was arrested. There were rumors that Shanana, Mario's wife and Tenon's former lover, was the mastermind behind the murder, allegedly motivated by her long-standing dislike for her then-husband. Despite strongly denying all accusations, Shanana eventually left town, relocating to Washington with her 3 children, just a few months after her husband's arrest. Shanana Gardner Fernandez was arrested on August 17, 2023, at her Washington apartment on the same charges as her current husband. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial with her co-defendants. Her alleged motive was to avoid sharing custody of her 2 children with her ex-husband and to gain control of disputed assets due to complicated relationships. The legal case is ongoing, and all defendants are currently facing legal proceedings. Shanana's husband, Tenon, has pleaded guilty to all charges and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. He is likely to face a minimum of 15 years in prison, which may be equivalent to a life sentence given his age. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but is refusing to testify against his wife, exercising his legal rights. Shanana Gardner Fernandez, however, denies all charges against her. Despite this, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danilo Cavalcante. Danilo Cavalcante was born on July 3, 1989, in Esto, a municipality in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. Unlike many children, he wasn't pampered or comforted with bedtime stories. He didn't have the luxury of being escorted to school at a young age. Instead, he grew up on the streets, a common experience for children in poor Brazilian neighborhoods. The environment in Brazil's favelas was marked by extreme poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment rates. These challenging conditions created a breeding ground for street crime to flourish. When you're exposed to poverty, lack of basic necessities, and violence from a young age, your instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive by any means necessary. Unfortunately, many individuals who grow up surrounded by violence often resort to similar behavior because it's all they know. The Brando family easily adapted to their new life, enjoying their cozy home and improved lifestyle. Deborah and her sister Sarah were extremely close, not only working together at their cleaning service, but also frequently talking on the phone throughout the day. They had achieved the peaceful and happy life they had moved to another country for. However, a chance encounter would soon alter the course of their lives forever. While spending a day off with her children at the park in 2020, Deborah met Danilo Cavalcante, a 31-year-old fellow countryman. A strong bond quickly formed between them. Danilo was very attentive to Deborah and kind to her children, which made her fall in love with him. She believed she had found a trustworthy and suitable partner. After a few months of dating, they rented a small house and started living together as a family. Initially, everything seemed perfect, but over time, Danilo's hot-tempered and emotional personality began to surface. As his relationship with Deborah deepened, he became increasingly jealous and possessive. Baseless mistrust gradually turned into complete control in their relationship. Scandals erupted repeatedly, leading to violent outbursts. Every night, Dino would get drunk and return home as a completely different, angry person. He demanded total submission from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of the children if she resisted. Despite his abuse, Deborah refused to back down and fought to protect her children. Fed up with the mistreatment, Deborah fled to her sister's home and eventually sought help from the police and the court, obtaining a restraining order to keep Cavalcante away. However, Cavalcante continued to stalk her, threatening violence if she tried to end the relationship permanently. Terrified for her life, Deborah began to investigate Danilo Cavalcante's true identity. By reaching out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media, she uncovered information about his past life and reasons for entering the United States. The truth about her lover's deception left Deborah in shock. On November 5, 2017, Danilo Cavalcante shot and fatally wounded his 20-year-old friend, Walter Jr. Moreira dos Rios in Figueroa, Brazil, over a dispute about a car repair debt. Cavalcante fled the country before authorities could arrest him due to a delay in registering the arrest warrant in the National Warrant Registry. 7 months later, in June 2018, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally and obtained a fake ID, eventually settling in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. After Danilo's true identity was revealed, Deborah demanded that he leave her alone, threatening to expose his secret if he refused. However, this ultimatum proved to be a fatal mistake. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children in front of her house, chatting quietly with an elderly neighbor while her kids played nearby. Danilo approached her, and the neighbor, who remained waiting, watched as they conversed calmly. But without warning, Danilo pulled out 2 knives and launched a brutal attack on Deborah. As she fell to the ground, he stabbed her repeatedly. Her terrified children screamed for him to stop, but Danilo was consumed by his own agony. He inflicted a total of 38 stab wounds on Deborah. A horrified neighbor attempted to stem the bleeding and provide emergency aid. Meanwhile, Deborah's daughter rushed to the neighbor's house to call for help and summon emergency services. Deborah Brendo was rushed to Pio Hospital, but sadly succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade arrest, remaining at large for several hours until he was eventually apprehended by Virginia State Police. Danilo Cavalcante was extradited to Pennsylvania and arrested in Chester County on August 16, 2023, pending trial for first-degree murder. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante had refused to accept the end of his relationship with Deborah and had subjected her to domestic violence and intimidation since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's child, who was present during the traumatic event, gave emotional testimony, recalling the horrific details of that day. The jury quickly reached a guilty verdict, sentencing Cavalcante to life in prison without parole. After the verdict, Cavalcante was taken to the Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. However, on August 31, 2023, at around 9 a.m., he escaped from the jail by climbing up a chimney, using the narrow space between 2 walls in the exercise yard to bypass the barbed wire fences and evade surveillance cameras. Danilo Cavalcante escaped by walking up the roof, running across it, climbing over the fence, and pushing through the barbed wire. This was a surprise, as prison officials thought they had fixed all the weaknesses in the prison system after a previous escape by Igor Bull. They had even added more barbed wire after another inmate, Igor Bolta, escaped a few months earlier. The authorities quickly launched a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, with alerts going out everywhere. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief gave regular updates to the public through press conferences, asking residents to be vigilant and help track down the escaped prisoner. This strategy worked, and within hours, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles west of the prison. On September 2nd, with the help of local residents, authorities used surveillance cameras to spot Cavalcante in the early morning hours. They quickly set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads to prevent his escape, and offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his capture. The initial search focused on a 2-mile radius around the jail in Pocopson Township and Chester County, which is heavily wooded. Just days after the escape, a local resident spotted Cavalcante in a creek bed, but he managed to flee into the woods before police arrived. The search continued, and the perimeter expanded after a week. A security camera then captured Cavalcante on film at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail and just south of the initial search area. The search team has been bolstered with more personnel and advanced equipment to locate Cavalcante. As part of their efforts, helicopters flew over the search area, broadcasting a recorded plea from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother, urging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, a security camera detected Cavalcante on a property approximately 2 miles south of the prison. In response, police established a new perimeter around the facility, Longwood Gardens, and nearby schools, which were closed during the search. As the search entered its 6th day, tension mounted in the community. With a convicted murderer on the loose, locals were anxious for answers about Cavalcante's prison escape. In response, police advised Philadelphia residents in Chester County to take precautions, including locking doors and windows, securing vehicles, and staying indoors. Pennsylvania prisoner Danilo Cavalcante, 34, escaped and sparked a massive manhunt. On September 9th, a crucial breakthrough came when Cavalcante was spotted on a video intercom call at a former colleague's home near Phoenix, about 20 miles outside the original search perimeter. Cavalcante, who was skilled at altering his appearance, had shaved and changed into new clothes, allowing him to evade detection as he traveled across the state. He stole a van from a dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville, seeking help and shelter from acquaintances. The abandoned van was found the next morning, September 10th, in a field in suburban East with an empty gas tank. As the search continued, the focus shifted to northern Chester County, and authorities updated the search perimeter. On September 11th, Cavalcante was added to the Interpol list, and the reward for information on his whereabouts was increased. That night, a local resident called emergency services to report a burglary at his garage, describing a suspect matching Cavalcante's description. The homeowner defended themselves by shooting the intruder, Cavalcante, 7 times. Despite being injured, Cavalcante managed to flee the scene and steal a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight from the home. When police arrived, they found Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes near the house. After identifying the perpetrator and learning the time he was now armed, police warned residents in the South Coventry neighborhood to secure their properties by locking doors, windows, and vehicles, and to stay indoors if possible for their safety. A breakthrough came around 1 a.m. on September 13th when an aircraft equipped with thermal imaging technology detected Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to poor weather conditions, police had to wait until sunrise to approach the location. Just after midnight, a security alarm went off within the search perimeter, leading authorities to the suspect's location. According to officials, the thermal imaging technology played a crucial role in tracking down Cavalcante, ultimately leading to his capture. On September 13th, around 8 a.m., the police found Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, asleep with a stolen rifle. He attempted to flee by crawling into dense undergrowth, but a police dog named Yoda caught him by biting his head and holding him until the police arrived. According to Lieutenant Colonel George Biven, Yoda inflicted minor head injuries on Cavalcante during the capture. Biven explained that the police were able to approach quietly, which gave them the element of surprise, allowing them to capture Cavalcante without anyone getting hurt. Immediately after his capture, Cavalcante was questioned and revealed that he had survived on watermelons and creek water, traveled only at night, and even had a close call with a police officer while hiding. He had planned to steal a car and escape to Canada. Since being returned to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following Cavalcante's capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed their gratitude to the numerous law enforcement officers who contributed to the search. Following Cavalcante's escape, the police set up a perimeter several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the Chester County Jail, faced intense criticism from local residents for failing to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents argued that the jail had the opportunity to implement necessary security upgrades after Igor Boll's escape attempt on May 19th, and that these upgrades could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape, as he used the same method as Bolta. The prison has taken action against the guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's escape on September 7th, citing that the guard had a clear chance to stop Cavalcante during the escape. Following the recapture of the offender, the Chester County Jail has implemented new security measures, including the installation of a tin roof over the area where Cavalcante climbed up 2 walls to reach the roof and escape. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro emphasized that Chester County officials need to provide answers regarding the escape, considering the prison's past history. He praised the collective effort of law enforcement agencies and local residents who worked together to apprehend and bring to justice Danilo, the offender who will now face punishment and remain behind bars.